You wake up in the middle of the night, and the silence is deafening. The house that once echoed with laughter and conversation now holds only the sound of your own breathing. You look around at the empty rooms, and a cold fear grips your heart. Is this what the rest of your life looks like? A slow fade into isolation, forgotten by the world, abandoned even by those you helped raise and support? You worked hard your entire life. You gave everything to provide for others. You sacrificed your present for their future. And now here you are, staring down the barrel of a lonely old age with nothing but regrets and an empty bank account to show for it. The retirement you dreamed about, the golden years you were promised, they look nothing like the peaceful sunset you imagined. Instead, you see yourself struggling to pay bills, unable to afford help when you need it most, too proud to ask for assistance, but too broke to maintain your dignity. You feel the weight of every financial mistake you made, every opportunity you ignored, every warning sign you dismissed because you thought you had more time. The fear is not just about being alone. It is about being alone and helpless, alone and broke, alone and dependent on a system that does not care, and children who have their own problems to worry about. This is the nightmare that keeps millions of people awake at night, the silent terror that nobody wants to talk about, but everyone feels creeping closer with each passing year. But what if I told you that this fear, this isolation you feel approaching, is not a punishment, but a divine interruption? What if the very thing you dread most is actually God removing distractions so He can prepare you for the greatest wealth transfer of your life? What if your solitude is not abandonment but appointed separation, a sacred space where God is teaching you the financial principles that will not only secure your future, but create a legacy that outlasts your lifetime? I am not talking about some religious platitude to make you feel better about a bad situation. I am talking about a fundamental shift in how you perceive both your finances and your purpose, a transformation so complete that you will look back on this moment of fear as the turning point where everything changed. See, most people approaching their later years are terrified of being alone because they have built their entire identity and security on other people. They depended on a job that eventually let them go, on a spouse who might leave or pass away, on children who grow up and move on with their own lives, on a government that promises security but delivers poverty. They placed their trust in systems that were designed to fail them, and now they are paying the price. But there is another way, a better way, the way of the steward who understands that God does not remove people from your life to isolate you but to elevate you, to strip away every false foundation so you can finally build on the only thing that lasts, which is divine purpose combined with financial wisdom. The principles I am about to share with you changed the trajectory of my life, and they have transformed thousands of others who were exactly where you are right now, staring at an uncertain future with nothing but fear and regret. These are not theories or motivational speeches. They are battle-tested strategies that work in the real world, principles that create real wealth and real security, even when you are starting from ground zero. But I need you to understand something crucial right from the start. This is not going to be easy, and it is not going to be quick. The reason most people end up alone and broke in their old age is because they spent decades making comfortable choices instead of correct choices, following the crowd instead of following conviction, listening to broke people instead of learning from those who actually built something that lasted. If you want different results, you need to be willing to think differently, act differently, and most importantly, believe differently about what is possible for your future. The question is not whether God can turn your situation around. The question is whether you are willing to do what it takes to partner with Him in that transformation. Are you ready to stop being a victim of circumstance and start being a steward of divine resources? Are you willing to face the uncomfortable truth about where you are and what it is going to take to get where you need to be? Because if you are, then everything is about to change. Let me paint you a picture of two different people approaching their retirement years. The first person spent their entire working life living paycheck to paycheck, believing that financial wisdom was for rich people and that God would somehow magically provide in their old age without them having to do anything differently. They ignored every nudge from the Holy Spirit to get their finances in order. They dismissed every opportunity to learn about money management as secular or greedy. They gave generously to every cause that tugged at their heartstrings without ever building a foundation that would allow them to give even more later. They worked hard. They were good people. They loved God and served others, but they never understood the principle of stewardship. When retirement arrived, they found themselves completely dependent on a social security check that barely covered rent, unable to afford proper health care, cutting pills in half to make their medication last longer, eating cheap processed food because fresh vegetables are too expensive. They cannot afford to visit their grandchildren who live in another state. They cannot help out when unexpected emergencies arise. They cannot even afford the dignity of dying without leaving debt behind for their family to clean up. They pray for miracles, but they are living with the consequences of decades of financial ignorance. Their isolation is not divine. It is self-imposed through a lifetime of poor choices, masked as spirituality. Now let me show you the second person. This individual also faced financial struggles, also made mistakes, also had setbacks and disappointments. But at some point they made a decision that changed everything. They decided that living broke in old age was not God's plan for their life, that there had to be a better way, and they committed to finding it no matter what it cost them in terms of comfort, convenience, or the approval of others. They started studying wealth creation not from a place of greed, but from a place of stewardship, understanding that God gives us resources not to hoard, but to multiply, so we can be a greater blessing to others. They learned that being alone did not mean being helpless, that solitude could be leveraged as a season of intense focus and growth, rather than a sentence of isolation. They took the time that others wasted on television and social media and invested it in learning about investment, about passive income, about building systems that would work for them long after their body stopped being able to work. They understood that retirement was not the end of productivity, but the beginning of a new chapter where their money worked while they focused on legacy and impact. When their retirement years arrived, they were not scrambling to survive. They were strategically positioned to thrive. They had multiple streams of income flowing in. They had investments that appreciated while they slept. They had positioned themselves to be the answer to other people's prayers instead of being the ones desperately praying for a way out. Their aloneness was not loneliness, it was freedom. The freedom to live with purpose and dignity. The freedom to be generous without restraint. The freedom to enjoy the fruits of decades of faithful stewardship. The difference between these two scenarios is not luck, it is not privilege, it is not even starting capital. The difference is mindset and application. The first person saw money as a necessary evil to be managed in survival mode. The second person saw money as a tool for kingdom impact that needed to be mastered and multiplied. The first person believed that wanting financial security was somehow unspiritual. The second person understood that financial chaos is a barrier to spiritual effectiveness, and that God wants us free from the constant anxiety that comes from living one emergency away from disaster. The first person waited for God to do something supernatural, while ignoring the natural wisdom He had already provided through His Word and through the examples of successful stewards throughout history. The second person understood that faith without works is dead, and that God's provision often comes through our willingness to apply His principles with discipline and consistency. The first person saw their later years as a time to wind down and wait for heaven. The second person saw their later years as the harvest season for everything they had been planting throughout their life, a time when wisdom and resources combine to create maximum impact with minimum effort. Here is what nobody tells you about getting older and facing the possibility of being alone. It is actually one of the greatest gifts God can give you if you know how to use it correctly. When the distractions of raising children are gone, when the demands of a full-time job are behind you, when the noise of a busy household fades into silence, you are left with something incredibly valuable that most people never get enough of during their prime earning years. You are left with clarity, with focus, with the mental and emotional bandwidth to finally build something that lasts. Think about the greatest wealth builders in history. Many of them did their most significant work later in life, not because they were smarter or more talented than younger people, but because they had the wisdom that only comes from experience combined with the focus that only comes from having fewer distractions. Rockefeller himself understood this principle deeply. He knew that accumulation in your later years was not about working harder, but about working smarter, about leveraging everything you learned from your mistakes and successes to create systems that multiplied your impact without multiplying your effort. He understood that being alone did not mean being without resources or influence. It meant being free from the obligations and expectations that prevent most people from making bold financial moves. But here is where most people get it wrong. They think that preparing for a secure old age means saving a little bit from each paycheck and hoping it is enough when they need it. They think retirement planning is about having a decent nest egg that they can slowly draw down until they die. This is poverty thinking disguised as prudent planning. This is why most retirees are stressed about money even after working their entire lives. Real financial security in your later years does not come from having a pile of money that you slowly spend until it runs out. Real security comes from having assets that generate income, from having systems that produce cash flow, from having positioned yourself in such a way that your wealth grows, even as your expenses are covered. This is the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich people have money. Wealthy people have systems that produce money. Rich people can become poor if they make a few bad decisions or live too long. Wealthy people have built something that cannot be destroyed by time or circumstance because it is not dependent on their active participation. Now some of you are thinking, this sounds great, but you are too old to start. You missed your chance. You should have learned this 30 years ago. It is too late for you now. This is exactly the lie that keeps people trapped in poverty and fear. It is never too late to start applying correct principles. Yes, you would be in a better position if you had started earlier, but you cannot change the past. You can only impact the future, and the future starts right now with the decision you make in this moment. I have seen people in their 60s and 70s completely transform their financial situation by finally getting serious about stewardship and wealth building. I have watched individuals who spent their entire lives broke discover passive income strategies that gave them more financial freedom in their retirement than they ever had in their working years. It is not about how much time you have left. It is about what you do with the time you have been given. Every day you delay is another day of potential wealth generation that you lose forever. Every month you spend making excuses is another month of compound interest working against you instead of for you. The best time to start was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. And the worst time is tomorrow because tomorrow never actually comes. It is always today. And today is when champions make the decision to change. Before we go any further, I need to pause here because I want to hear from you. I want to know what your biggest struggle is when it comes to preparing financially for your later years. Is it that you do not know where to start? Is it that you are overwhelmed by all the conflicting advice out there? Is it that you feel like you have already made too many mistakes to recover from? Is it that you are afraid of taking risks because you do not have time to recover if something goes wrong? I need you to take a moment right now and leave a comment below using this simple format. Say this: my biggest challenge with preparing financially for my future is blank, and I need to overcome this because blank. Fill in those blanks with your honest truth. Do not worry about sounding smart or spiritual. Just be real. This is not about judgment. This is about clarity, because you cannot fix what you are not willing to acknowledge. When you share your struggle in the comments, you are doing two powerful things. First, you are breaking the shame and silence that keeps so many people trapped in financial struggle. Money problems thrive in secrecy, and they die in the light of honest conversation. Second, you are helping me create content that actually addresses your real needs, instead of just guessing at what might be helpful. Your comment could be the breakthrough moment not just for you but for someone else reading who has the exact same struggle, but felt too ashamed to admit it. So go ahead right now, pause this video if you need to, and drop that comment. My biggest challenge with preparing financially for my future is blank, and I need to overcome this because blank. I will be reading every single comment, and I promise you that your honesty will not be wasted. This is the first step in your transformation, the willingness to admit where you actually are, instead of where you wish you were. Now let us talk about the specific mindset shifts that separate those who thrive in their later years from those who barely survive. The first and most critical shift is moving from a consumer mentality to an investor mentality. Most people spend their entire lives consuming. They consume food, entertainment, comfort, status symbols, experience, and they fund this consumption with their labor. They trade hours for dollars and then trade dollars for temporary satisfaction. And they do this on repeat until they physically cannot work anymore, at which point they realize they have nothing left to show for decades of effort. An investor mentality is completely different. An investor asks a different question before spending any money. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" an investor asks, "Will this make me money or cost me money in the long run?" Instead of buying things that depreciate, an investor acquires assets that appreciate or generate income. Instead of spending on comfort today, an investor delays gratification to create compound returns tomorrow. This is not about being cheap or denying yourself everything enjoyable. This is about being strategic with every dollar and understanding that money is a tool, not a toy. The second mindset shift is moving from security through employment to security through assets. Most people believe their job is their security, so they spend their entire career trying to be indispensable to their employer, climbing the corporate ladder, chasing promotions and raises, believing that if they just work hard enough and stay loyal enough, they will be taken care of in their retirement. Then they get laid off at 55 because a younger person can do their job for less money, or their company downsizes, or their industry becomes obsolete, and suddenly they realize their security was an illusion all along. Real security does not come from having a good job. It comes from owning assets that produce income regardless of whether you show up to work. This could be rental properties that generate monthly cash flow, dividend-paying stocks that send checks to your mailbox, a business that runs with or without your daily involvement, intellectual property that pays royalties, or any number of other vehicles that turn your money into an employee that works around the clock without complaining or needing a vacation. The third mindset shift is moving from hoping God will provide to partnering with God through stewardship. There is a dangerous theology floating around Christian circles that basically says, you do not need to worry about money because God will take care of everything. And while it is true that God is our provider, it is also true that He has given us brains, wisdom, resources, and opportunities that we are expected to steward faithfully. The Bible is full of financial principles and parables about multiplication and stewardship, and nowhere does it suggest that we should be passive or irresponsible with resources and just hope everything works out. God can multiply your 5 loaves and 2 fish, but you have to bring the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He can turn your water into wine, but you have to fill the jars with water. He can increase your territory, but you have to be faithful with the territory you currently have. Partnership means you do your part and trust God to do His part, and your part includes learning how money works, applying wisdom to your finances, and taking bold action when He opens doors of opportunity. The fourth mindset shift is understanding that debt is not a tool, it is a trap. The financial industry has done an incredible job convincing people that debt is normal, that everyone has it, that you need it to build wealth, that certain kinds of debt are even good. This is propaganda designed to keep you enslaved to payments for the rest of your life. The borrower is servant to the lender, and when you are making payments to credit card companies, car loans, mortgages, student loans, and every other form of consumer debt, you are working for them, not for yourself. Every dollar that goes to interest is a dollar that cannot be invested in your future. Every monthly payment is a claim on your future income before you even earn it. Debt robs you of options, of flexibility, of the ability to take advantage of opportunities when they arise. Getting out of debt and staying out of debt is not optional. If you want to build real wealth in your later years, it is absolutely essential. You cannot build financial security while feeding the debt monster month after month, year after year. The fifth mindset shift is recognizing that your living expenses determine your financial freedom, not your income. Most people think if they just made more money, their problems would be solved, so they chase raises and promotions and side hustle, and then they wonder why they still feel broke even though they are making more than ever. The reason is lifestyle inflation. As income goes up, expenses go up to match it or exceed it, and you end up on the same hamster wheel just with nicer stuff. The path to wealth is not making more, it is needing less while investing the difference. If you can live on 50% of your income and invest the other 50%, you will build more wealth than someone who makes twice as much, but spends 95% of it. This is why minimalism and contentment are not just spiritual virtues, they are wealth-building strategies. Every unnecessary expense you eliminate is money that can be deployed toward assets that generate passive income and move you closer to true financial independence. These mindset shifts are not optional if you want to transform your financial future. They are absolutely required, and the reason most people never make them is because they require you to think differently than 95% of the population. It requires you to reject the consumer culture that bombards you with messages about what you should buy and what you need to be happy. It requires you to turn off the financial entertainment networks that are designed to keep you trading and churning your portfolio to generate commissions. It requires you to stop taking advice from broke family members who mean well but have never built anything themselves. It requires you to be okay with people thinking you are weird or extreme or too focused on money when really you are just being a faithful steward who refuses to end up broke and dependent in your old age. Let me give you some extremely practical strategies that you can start implementing immediately, regardless of where you are right now financially. The first strategy is radical expense elimination. I am not talking about cutting out your daily coffee or skipping a vacation. I am talking about a complete audit of every single thing you spend money on, and ruthlessly cutting everything that is not absolutely essential. This means downsizing your home if you have more space than you need. This means selling the nice car and buying a reliable older vehicle with cash. This means canceling every subscription service, every membership, every convenience that you have gotten used to, but do not actually need. This means learning to cook instead of eating out. This means cutting your own lawn, doing your own repairs, finding free entertainment instead of paid entertainment. I know this sounds extreme and uncomfortable, and you are probably thinking you already live pretty modestly, but I promise you there is fat to cut if you are honest about it. Most people could reduce their expenses by 30 to 50% if they were willing to be uncomfortable for a season, and that freed up money is the seed capital that becomes your future financial freedom. The second strategy is income acceleration in your prime earning years. If you are still working, you need to be maximizing your earning potential, and this might mean getting uncomfortable. It might mean asking for the raise you have been putting off requesting. It might mean switching to a company that pays better, even if it means a longer commute. It might mean starting a side business that leverages your existing skills and knowledge. It might mean learning a high-income skill that is in demand regardless of your age. The goal is not to increase your income so you can spend more. The goal is to create a gap between what you earn and what you spend so you have capital to invest. Every extra $1,000 you can generate and invest while you are still healthy and able to work is potentially tens of thousands of dollars in your retirement account through the power of compound growth over time. The third strategy is strategic asset acquisition, focused on cash flow. You need to be putting your money into things that pay you regularly, not things that might appreciate in value someday if you are lucky. Real estate that generates rental income, dividend stocks that pay quarterly, a small business that can be systematized and eventually run by someone else. The key is cash flow, money coming in on a regular basis without you having to actively work for it. This is how wealthy people actually live. They are not spending down their principal. They are living off the income their assets generate, and their principal keeps growing because they reinvest surplus cash flow into more income-producing assets. This is the machine you need to build. And the earlier you start, the less money you need to put in because time is on your side through compound growth. The fourth strategy is tax optimization through legitimate strategy. The tax code is written to incentivize certain behaviors, and if you are not taking advantage of these incentives, you are voluntarily giving away money that could be building your future. This means maxing out retirement accounts that give you tax advantages. This means understanding how to use health savings accounts. This means learning about the tax benefits of real estate investing. This means possibly structuring your side income as a business to take advantage of business expense deduction. I am not talking about anything shady or illegal. I am talking about using the tax code the way it was designed to be used by people who actually read it instead of just complaining about it. The money you save on taxes is money that can be invested, and over a lifetime this can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional wealth. The fifth strategy is continuous financial education. You cannot implement what you do not understand, and most people are financially illiterate by design because the system benefits when you do not know how money works. You need to commit to learning about personal finance, about investing, about business, about tax strategy, about wealth building, and you need to do this consistently over time. This means reading books written by people who actually built wealth, not by academics who study it from a distance. This means listening to podcasts and watching videos from people who have the results you want. This means potentially hiring a coach or mentor who can guide you through specific challenges. This means joining communities of people who are on the same journey, so you can learn from their wins and avoid their mistakes. Education is the highest return on investment you can make, because it changes not just what you do, but how you think. And when you change how you think, you change everything. Now let us address the elephant in the room that is probably rattling around in your mind as you listen to all this. You are thinking this all sounds great in theory, but you are too far behind to catch up. You have already wasted too many years. You do not have decades for compound growth to work its magic. You need solutions that work in the time you actually have left. I hear you, and I am not going to lie to you with false hope or pretend this is going to be easy. You are right that time is your enemy if you are starting late. But time is not the only factor in wealth building. Intensity matters too. A person who gets serious and goes all in for 5 years can often accomplish more than someone who dabbles half-heartedly for 20 years. If you are late to the game, you make up for lost time by increasing intensity, by making bolder moves, by taking calculated risks that younger people with more time do not need to take. This might mean investing in opportunities with higher potential returns, even though they come with higher risks. This might mean working longer than you planned instead of retiring at the traditional age. This might mean being willing to make radical lifestyle changes that give you maximum financial flexibility. This might mean leveraging your accumulated wisdom and experience in ways that create value faster than someone younger could. There is also a harsh truth we need to confront here. Some of you listening to this have spent so long ignoring financial wisdom that you are not going to be able to fully recover to where you could have been if you had started earlier. That ship has sailed, and no amount of wishful thinking will bring it back. But that does not mean you are without options or hope. It just means your options are different than they would have been 20 years ago. You might not be able to retire in luxury, but you can position yourself to retire with dignity and security. You might not be able to leave a massive inheritance, but you can avoid leaving debt and burden. You might not be able to fund your dream lifestyle, but you can fund a peaceful and purpose-filled life that is not consumed by financial stress. The question is not, can you get back everything you lost? The question is, are you willing to salvage what you can and make the most of the time you have left? Some wealth is always better than no wealth, and a few good years of financial peace are worth fighting for, even if you cannot have decades of it. The biggest obstacle you face is not your circumstances, it is your excuses. It is the voice in your head that says you are too old, too broke, too far behind, too uneducated, too tired, too unlucky. It is the story you tell yourself about why wealth building is for other people, but not for you. It is the comfort you find in commiserating with other broke people instead of learning from successful people. It is the pride that keeps you from admitting you need to change and asking for help. It is the fear of looking stupid, or failing, or being judged. These mental barriers are far more powerful than any external obstacle you face, and they are the reason most people never even try to change their financial situation. They accept poverty as their destiny. They rationalize it with spiritual platitudes about money being the root of evil or rich people not getting into heaven. They convince themselves that struggling is noble and that God wants them humble, which somehow means broke. This is not humility. This is rebellion against the stewardship mandate that God gave to every believer. Here is what biblical stewardship actually looks like. It recognizes that everything you have been given, every resource, every talent, every opportunity, belongs to God, and you are the manager, not the owner. It understands that faithful stewards multiply what they are given. They do not bury it in the ground out of fear, or squander it on consumption. It operates from abundance, not scarcity, believing that God is able to provide more than enough for every need and every good work. It combines faith with action, trusting God for supernatural outcomes while doing the natural work required. It gives generously from a full cup rather than an empty one, understanding that you cannot give what you do not have, and that increasing your capacity to give requires increasing your resources. It plans ahead while remaining flexible, building for the future while trusting God with outcomes you cannot control. It seeks wisdom from multiple sources, learning from both biblical principles and proven strategies of successful stewards throughout history. It rejects the false choice between spirituality and financial success, understanding that money is morally neutral and that having resources allows you to do more good in the world than being broke ever could. When you live alone in your later years, when the house is quiet and the demands are few, You have been given a gift that most people squander. You have been given focused time, concentrated energy, and freedom from the opinions and expectations of others who would try to keep you playing small. This is your opportunity to build something significant in whatever time you have left, to create a legacy that speaks louder than your lifetime, to position yourself as a blessing instead of a burden. But this gift comes with a choice. You can waste it feeling sorry for yourself, replaying your regrets, mourning what you lost or never had, slowly declining into irrelevance and dependency. Or you can embrace it as the divine appointment it is, recognizing that God is separating you from distractions so you can finally focus on what matters most, building something of eternal value with the temporary resources you have been given. The season of solitude is not your punishment. It is your preparation for a harvest that will feed generations after you are gone. If you have made it this far in this video, you are not like most people. Most people would have clicked away looking for something easier, something more entertaining, something that does not challenge their comfortable excuses. But you are still here, which tells me something important about you. It tells me you are ready for change. It tells me you are tired of living with financial stress and fear. It tells me you understand that transformation requires information, and that information requires your attention and time. I want to invite you to take the next step in this journey by subscribing to this channel and turning on notifications. This is not just about getting more content. This is about committing to your own financial transformation. When you subscribe, you are telling yourself that you are serious about learning and applying these principles. You are surrounding yourself with content and a community that will reinforce the mindset shifts you need to make. You are positioning yourself to receive consistent training and encouragement that will keep you moving forward even when it gets hard. The videos on this channel are not random entertainment. They are building blocks of a comprehensive financial education that will transform how you think about money, wealth, and stewardship. Every week, I am releasing content that addresses specific challenges, breaks down complex strategies into actionable steps, and keeps you focused on what actually matters for building real wealth. When you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, you are not just following a channel, you are joining a movement of believers who refuse to accept poverty as their destiny, who are committed to faithful stewardship, and who are building something that will outlast them. So go ahead right now, click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and commit to showing up consistently for your own transformation. This is an investment in your future that costs nothing but has unlimited potential return. Let me share with you what separates those who actually change their financial situation from those who just consume content and remain stuck. The difference is implementation. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. You can know every principle I teach, understand every strategy I explain, agree with every point I make, and still end up broke if you do not actually do anything with what you learn. Implementation requires a few key things. First, it requires decisiveness. You have to make a firm decision that things are going to change, not a wish or a hope, but a decision, a line in the sand that marks before and after in your life. Second, it requires a plan. You cannot just wing this or hope for the best. You need to sit down and map out exactly where you are, where you want to go, and what specific steps will get you there. Third, it requires action despite fear. You will be afraid of making mistakes, of looking foolish, of failing, but you have to move forward anyway because staying where you are is guaranteed failure, while taking action at least gives you a chance at success. Fourth, it requires consistency. One day of good decisions does not create wealth. 1,000 days of good decisions compounds into transformation. Fifth, it requires accountability. You need someone or something keeping you honest about whether you are actually doing what you said you would do or just making excuses. This is why community matters so much in financial transformation. When you are surrounded by people who are all working toward the same goal, who understand the struggle, who can celebrate your wins and support you through your losses, you are exponentially more likely to succeed than if you try to do this alone. The comments section of these videos is becoming a powerful community of people who are on this same journey, sharing their struggles and victories, encouraging each other, holding each other accountable. This is not just viewers. This is a tribe of people who are rejecting the broke mindset that society tries to program into us and are choosing the path of faithful stewardship instead. When you engage in the comments, When you share your story, when you support others who are struggling, you are not just helping them. You are reinforcing your own commitment and surrounding yourself with the energy of people who are moving in the right direction. Now I want to address something that might be bothering some of you. You might be thinking this all sounds very focused on money and wealth, and that seems unspiritual or even dangerous, given what the Bible says about the love of money being the root of evil. Let me be very clear about something. The love of money is indeed a root of all kinds of evil, but notice it is the love of money, not money itself. Money is a tool, a resource, a form of stored energy and potential. It is morally neutral until you assign it purpose through your intentions and actions. The problem is not having money. The problem is making money your God, trusting in it for security instead of God, using it for selfish purposes instead of kingdom impact. A wealthy believer who uses their resources for good is far more dangerous to the kingdom of darkness than a broke believer who cannot fund anything beyond their own survival. Think about it this way. Who can do more to advance the gospel? Someone who can barely pay their own bills, or someone who can fund missions, support ministries, help families in crisis, invest in kingdom businesses, and still have plenty left over? Who can be a better witness of God's provision? Someone who is constantly stressed about money, or someone who lives in peace and abundance and attributes it to faithful stewardship? Who can leave a greater legacy? Someone who dies broke with nothing to pass on, or someone who builds generational wealth that continues blessing people long after they are gone? The goal is not to get rich so you can live in luxury and excess. The goal is to be a faithful steward who multiplies the resources God has given you so you can increase your capacity for kingdom impact. This is not prosperity gospel. This is stewardship theology. There is a massive difference. Prosperity gospel says God wants you rich just because He loves you, and you deserve it. Stewardship theology says God wants you to be a faithful manager of resources so you can participate in His work on earth, and that faithful management often results in increase so you can do more. One is focused on consumption and personal blessing. The other is focused on multiplication and kingdom impact. One makes you the point. The other makes God's purposes the point and you the vessel. If your desire for wealth is rooted in selfishness, status, security apart from God, or comparison with others, then yes, you are in dangerous spiritual territory. But if your desire for wealth is rooted in wanting to be a better steward, to have greater capacity for generosity, to leave a legacy that points others to God, to free yourself from financial stress so you can focus on eternal purposes, then you are operating in alignment with biblical principle. The Apostle Paul said he learned to be content in all circumstance, whether in plenty or in want, and that is the heart attitude we need to cultivate. But notice he did not say he preferred being in want or that there was some special virtue in poverty. He said he could handle both, that his peace was not tied to his circumstances, that his trust was in God regardless of his financial situation. This is the balance we are after, being content with where you are while actively working to improve your stewardship, being at peace with what you have while pursuing increase for the right reason, being free from the love of money while respecting it as a tool that requires wisdom and skill to manage well. This is mature Christianity, not the immature either, or thinking that says you are either spiritual or financially successful, but you cannot be both. History is full of believers who were both deeply devoted to God and incredibly successful in business and wealth building, and they used their resources to change the world in ways that broke people could never accomplish. So if you are sitting there feeling convicted that you have been hiding behind false spirituality as an excuse for financial irresponsibility, good. That conviction is the Holy Spirit pushing you toward change. If you are feeling uncomfortable because you realize you have been lazy or fearful, instead of being a faithful steward, good. That discomfort is the beginning of transformation. If you are feeling overwhelmed because you do not know where to start or what to do first, good. That overwhelm means you are finally facing reality instead of avoiding it, and reality is where change happens. The question is, what are you going to do with these feelings? Are you going to let them fade as soon as this video ends and go back to your comfortable patterns? Or are you going to channel them into decisive action that changes your trajectory? Here is a simple action plan you can implement starting today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel more ready, today. First, Take 15 minutes and write down your complete financial picture. How much do you earn? How much do you spend? What do you own? What do you owe? You cannot create a plan if you do not know where you are starting from, and most people are avoiding this step because they are afraid of what they will discover. Face it anyway. Second, identify one expense you can eliminate immediately. Not reduce, eliminate. Something you are paying for that you do not actually need and can cut right now. Cancel it today and redirect that money toward debt reduction or investment. Third, commit to 1 hour of financial education this week. Read a book, watch educational videos, listen to a podcast, but invest 60 focused minutes in learning something new about wealth building. Fourth, find one person in your life who is financially successful and ask them to coffee or a phone call. Tell them you are trying to improve your financial situation and ask if they would be willing to share one piece of advice that made the biggest difference for them. Most successful people love talking about what they learned and will be generous with their wisdom if you show genuine interest. Fifth, pray specifically about your finances. Not a vague prayer for help, but a specific conversation with God about your situation, your fears, your goals, and your commitment to being a better steward. Ask Him to give you wisdom, to open opportunities, to help you see what you have been blind to give you the courage to make hard changes. These 5 steps cost you nothing but time and honesty, but they will start a momentum that can transform your entire financial future if you build on them consistently. The key is that you must actually do them, not just think about doing them, not just agree they are good ideas, but actually implement them today. This is the test of whether you are serious about change or just entertaining yourself with financial content. Implementation is the dividing line between talkers and doers, between dreamers and achievers, between those who wish things were different and those who make things different. Let me paint a picture of what your life could look like 5 years from now if you fully commit to this path. Imagine waking up in your own home that is completely paid for, no mortgage hanging over your head. Imagine checking your accounts and seeing multiple streams of income flowing in from investments and assets you built or acquired, enough to cover your expenses with surplus left over. Imagine being able to help your children or grandchildren when they face unexpected expenses without it causing you financial stress. Imagine being able to give generously to causes you care about, to kingdom work, to people in need, without having to check your bank balance first. Imagine having a simple will and estate plan in place that ensures your wealth gets distributed according to your wishes and values after you are gone, instead of being eaten up by taxes and legal fees. Imagine living without the constant anxiety about running out of money, about what happens if you get sick, about being a burden on others. Imagine having the freedom to spend your time on things that matter, on relationships, on purpose, on legacy, instead of worrying about survival. This is not a fantasy. This is the reality that thousands of people are living right now, because they made the decision years ago to stop accepting poverty as their destiny and start applying wealth-building principles with consistency and faith. And now imagine the alternative. Imagine being 5 years older but in the exact same financial situation you are in right now, or worse because inflation eroded what little you had. Imagine looking back and realizing you wasted 5 years consuming content but never implementing, learning principles but never applying, making excuses instead of making progress. Imagine the regret of knowing you had opportunities to change, but you let fear or laziness or pride keep you stuck. Imagine trying to explain to your future self why you did not take action when you knew what you needed to do. Which scenario do you want to be living in 5 years from now? Because the choice you make today determines which path you end up on. You do not get to wish yourself into a better future. You have to build it through decisions and actions compounded over time. The beautiful thing about being alone in your later years is that you do not have to negotiate with anyone about these decisions. You do not have to convince a spouse who does not share your vision. You do not have to manage expectations from children who think you should spend your money on them. You do not have to deal with people judging your choices or trying to pull you back into comfortable mediocrity. You are free to go all in without worrying about anyone else's opinion. This is not loneliness. This is liberty, and if you leverage it correctly, it can be the most productive season of your entire life. The distractions are gone. The obligations are minimized. The focus is clear. You have everything you need to make something significant happen with whatever time you have left, but it requires you to see this season as opportunity instead of tragedy. Some of you might be thinking, but what about relationships? What about family? What about not dying alone? These are legitimate concerns, but they are solved through a position of strength, not weakness. When you get your financial house in order, when you build security and margin into your life, you actually become more attractive to healthy relationships. You are not desperate. You are not needy. You are not looking for someone to rescue you or support you. You are a person of value who has something to offer, and that positions you to build connections based on mutual respect and shared values instead of codependency and survival. Furthermore, when you have resources and freedom, you can be more intentional about building and maintaining relationships that matter instead of being consumed by financial stress that leaves you no energy for anything else. Financial peace creates space for relational health. Financial chaos creates isolation, even when you are surrounded by people because you are too stressed to truly connect. Let me also address the fear of dying alone, which haunts many people as they age. The truth is that everyone ultimately faces death individually, regardless of how many people are in the room when it happens. Death is a solitary journey in that sense. You cannot take anyone with you, and no amount of people gathered around your deathbed changes the fundamental reality that you are crossing that threshold alone. What matters is not who is physically present when you die, but what you leave behind in terms of impact and legacy. A person who dies alone in body, but who has influenced thousands through their faithful stewardship, who has funded kingdom work that continues bearing fruit, who has taught others principles that transform their lives, who has built something that blesses people they never met. That person is not alone in any meaningful sense. Their impact echoes through eternity. Contrast that with someone who dies surrounded by family, but who leaves nothing but debt and disappointment, who spent their life consuming instead of contributing, who was a burden instead of a blessing. Which death is truly lonely? Your later years are not about avoiding death. Death is coming for all of us, and no amount of money or people or anything else will prevent it. Your later years are about finishing strong, about maximizing whatever time you have left for kingdom impact, about stewarding your resources in a way that creates legacy instead of leaving mess. This is what it means to be separated by God, set apart for a sacred purpose that requires your full focus and commitment. Stop seeing your solitude as abandonment and start seeing it as appointment. Stop mourning what you lost and start building with what you have. Stop waiting for life to happen to you and start making life happen through your decisions and action. The clock is ticking, and every moment you delay is a moment you cannot get back. The money you do not invest today will not have time to compound into the wealth you need tomorrow. The principles you do not apply this week will not benefit you next month. The changes you do not make this year will still be needed next year, but with less time to work. Urgency is appropriate here, not panic, but holy urgency, the recognition that we are not promised tomorrow, and that faithful stewardship requires action today. James says people who know what they ought to do but do not do it, for them it is sin. You now know what you ought to do. You know you should get your finances in order. You know you should eliminate debt. You know you should build income-producing assets. You know you should live below your means. You know you should seek wisdom and apply it. The question is, will you do it? Or will you let this be one more piece of information that entertains you temporarily, but changes nothing? Your eternity might not hang in the balance, but your quality of life, for whatever years you have left, absolutely does. And more importantly, your capacity to be used by God for kingdom purposes in this season depends on whether you step into faithful stewardship or remain trapped in financial chaos. I want you to make a decision right now, not later, not after you think about it more. Right now. Decide that you are done making excuses. Decide that you are going to be a faithful steward regardless of what it costs you in terms of comfort or convenience. Decide that you will learn what you need to learn and do what you need to do to transform your financial situation before it is too late. Decide that your later years will be marked by peace and purpose instead of stress and regret. Make that decision internally right now, and then make it external by taking immediate action on at least one of the steps I gave you earlier. Do not let this moment pass without capturing it with a concrete action that proves to yourself that something shifted today. The separation you are experiencing, the aloneness, the quiet, the removal of distractions, this is not random and it is not cruel. This is divine strategy to position you for a breakthrough that would be impossible if you were still surrounded by all the noise and obligations that kept you comfortable but stuck. God is not punishing you by removing people. He is preparing you by removing distractions. He is not abandoning you to loneliness. He is appointing you to a season of focused stewardship that will define your legacy. The question is, will you recognize this for what it is and rise to meet it? Or will you waste it feeling sorry for yourself and wondering why God does not care? He cares more than you can imagine, so much that He is willing to make you uncomfortable to get your attention, to strip away the false securities you were clinging to, so you will finally cling to Him and His principles, to give you one more chance to get it right before your time runs out. This is your moment. This is your opportunity. This is your divine appointment disguised as isolation. Everything you have been through, every mistake you made, every lesson you learned the hard way, it all prepared you for this moment when you finally stop running from financial responsibility and start running toward faithful stewardship. The resources are available. The knowledge is accessible. The opportunity is in front of you. The only question is whether you have the courage to seize it. Stop waiting for perfect circumstances. They are never coming. Stop waiting to feel ready. You will never feel fully ready. Stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You are the rescue you have been waiting for through God's power and your faithful application of His principle. Let me share with you a principle that Rockefeller understood deeply, and that transformed not just his wealth, but his entire approach to life and legacy. He called it the principle of systematic accumulation. Most people think wealth building is about big wins, lucky breaks, hitting it rich with one great investment or idea. This is why lottery tickets are so popular among broke people. They are hoping for the one big score that will solve all their problems. But real wealth, lasting wealth, generational wealth, it is never built on luck or one-time events. It is built on systems that work consistently over time, small gains compounded daily into massive results. Rockefeller was not the richest man in history because he made one brilliant investment. He became the richest man in history because he created systems that generated wealth automatically, and then he protected those systems like his life depended on it, because in a very real sense it did. Think about what a system actually is in the context of wealth building. A system is a set of processes and principles that produce predictable results when applied consistently. It takes human emotion and weakness out of the equation as much as possible. It does not depend on you feeling motivated or inspired or lucky. It just works because it is designed to work based on sound principles and disciplined execution. When you build a system for your finance, you are creating something that generates wealth even on days when you do not feel like it, even when you are tired or discouraged or distracted, even when you are sleeping or sick or on vacation. The system keeps working because it is not dependent on your momentary state, but on the structure you built. Here is what a basic wealth-building system looks like for someone in their later years who is starting from behind. First, you automate everything possible. Your income, whatever it is, goes into one account. From that account, automated transfers immediately move money to different buckets based on predetermined percentages. 10% goes to giving because you cannot out-give God. And generosity is a spiritual principle that opens doors of blessing. 20 to 30% goes directly to debt elimination if you have debt, or to investment if you are debt-free. This happens before you ever see the money, before you have a chance to spend it on something else, before you can talk yourself out of it. The remaining percentage covers your living expenses, and you learn to live on whatever is left after the priority transfers are made. This is called paying yourself first, and it is the opposite of how most people operate. Most people pay everyone else first through bills and expenses, and then try to save or invest whatever is left over, which is usually nothing. They have it backward, which is why they stay broke. The second part of the system is regular review and adjustment. Once a month, you sit down and look at every category of spending. You are looking for patterns, for waste, for opportunities to optimize. Maybe you notice you are spending more on eating out than you realize, and you can cut that in half. Maybe you see a subscription you forgot about and do not use. Maybe you identify a bill that you can negotiate lower. Every dollar you free up gets redirected into the investment or debt elimination bucket. This monthly review also includes tracking your net worth, which is simply everything you own minus everything you owe. Most people avoid calculating their net worth because they are afraid of the number, but you cannot improve what you do not measure. When you track it monthly, you start to see progress even if it is small at first, and that progress becomes motivating and builds momentum. The third part of the system is education and skill building. You commit to learning something new about wealth building every single week. This is not optional or something you do when you feel like it. It is baked into your system. Maybe you spend every Sunday afternoon reading a chapter from a financial book. Maybe you listen to educational podcasts during your commute or morning routine. Maybe you watch one video per week that teaches you about investing or real estate or business. The specific method does not matter as much as the consistency. Over a year, this adds up to enormous amounts of new knowledge that you can then apply. Over 5 years, you become legitimately educated about money in a way that most people never are, because they only learn through painful experience instead of studying the successes and failures of others. The fourth part of the system is community and accountability. You cannot do this alone, or rather you can, but it is much harder, and you are more likely to quit when things get difficult. You need to be in regular contact with at least one other person who is on the same journey, someone you can share wins and struggles, someone who will call you out when you are making excuses, someone who celebrates when you hit milestones. This could be a formal accountability partner, a small group focused on financial stewardship, an online community of like-minded people, or even just a friend who shares your values and goals. The key is regular contact and honest communication. When you have to report your progress to someone else, you are far more likely to actually make progress. The fifth part of the system is the strategic use of time. Your time is your most valuable asset, more valuable than money because you can always make more money, but you can never make more time. In your later years especially, every day matters, and you cannot afford to waste time on activities that do not move you toward your goals. This means you need to audit how you are currently spending your time and be ruthless about eliminating or reducing anything that is not essential or valuable. How much time do you spend watching television or scrolling social media or engaging in activities that are pure consumption with no return? If you are spending 2 hours a day on entertainment, that is 14 hours a week, roughly 60 hours a month, 720 hours a year. Imagine if you redirected even half of that time into learning a high-income skill, building a side business, or working on investment research. The impact over a year would be transformative. Over 5 years, it would be life-changing. Now let me give you some specific investment strategies that are appropriate for people in their later years who need to build wealth with limited time. The conventional wisdom says that older people should invest conservatively, mostly in bonds and cash equivalents, protecting principal rather than seeking growth. This is terrible advice for anyone who is behind on their wealth-building goals. Conservative investing is for people who already have enough money and just need to preserve it. If you do not have enough money yet, conservative investing guarantees you will never catch up because the returns are too low to make meaningful progress. You need to think differently. You need to accept more risk in exchange for higher potential returns, but you need to do it intelligently, not recklessly. Real estate remains one of the best wealth-building vehicles available, especially for people who are starting later. The reason is leverage and cash flow. With real estate, you can control a valuable asset with a relatively small down payment, meaning you get returns on the bank's money, not just your own. A rental property that generates positive cash flow after all expenses gives you monthly income while also appreciating in value over time. The key is to focus on cash flow, not speculation. You want properties that pay you every month, not properties you hope will go up in value someday. Look for areas with strong rental demand, good job markets, and reasonable prices relative to rents. A single rental property generating $500 a month in positive cash flow might not sound like much, but 4 of those properties gives you $2,000 a month, which could cover a significant portion of your living expenses. The challenge is getting into that first property, which requires saving for a down payment and having good enough credit to qualify for financing. This is why the debt elimination and expense reduction parts of your system are so critical. They create the capacity to accumulate the capital needed for real investment. Another strategy is dividend growth investing. This means buying shares of companies that not only pay dividends, but have a track record of increasing those dividends every year. Companies like this tend to be stable, profitable businesses that generate consistent cash flow. When you own these stocks, you get paid quarterly regardless of what the stock price is doing, and over time those dividend payments grow. If you invest in a diversified portfolio of dividend growth stocks and reinvest the dividends to buy more shares, you create a compounding machine that can generate serious income over time. The key is to start as soon as possible and to add money consistently, even if it is small amounts. $100 a month invested in dividend growth stocks might seem insignificant, but over 10 years with dividend reinvestment and growth, it could turn into a substantial portfolio, generating meaningful monthly income. For those who are more entrepreneurially minded or have specific skills and knowledge, building a small online business can be incredibly lucrative, especially in your later years when you have accumulated wisdom and experience that younger people do not have. The internet has democratized business in a way that was impossible even 20 years ago. You can start a consulting practice, create and sell digital products, build a coaching business, or provide services online to clients anywhere in the world, all with minimal upfront investment. The key is to focus on monetizing knowledge or skills you already have, rather than trying to learn something completely new. What do you know how to do well? What problems have you solved in your life or career that other people are currently struggling with? What experience do you have that could benefit others if packaged correctly? These questions point toward potential business ideas that you could execute without needing to go back to school or invest years in learning new skills. The beautiful thing about building multiple income streams is that they compound not just individually, but collectively. Your rental income covers your basic expenses, while your dividend income gets reinvested to grow that income stream, while your online business income gets used to acquire another rental property or buy more dividend stocks. Each stream feeds and grows the others, creating acceleration that would be impossible if you were only focused on one vehicle. This is how people who start late can catch up, by building multiple systems simultaneously that all work toward the same goal of financial independence and security. But here is what you need to understand about all of these strategies. They require capital to start, whether it is a down payment for real estate, initial investment for dividend stocks, or seed money for a business. This brings us back to the fundamental principle that you must create a gap between what you earn and what you spend, and that gap becomes your seed capital for building wealth. If you are spending everything you make, or worse, spending more than you make through debt, you will never have capital to invest, and you will never escape the paycheck-to-paycheck trap. This is why the expense elimination and income acceleration strategies I mentioned earlier are not optional nice-to-have ideas. They are absolutely foundational requirements. You cannot build wealth without capital. You cannot create capital without a gap. And you cannot create a gap without either making more or spending less, or ideally both. Let me address a specific fear that many people face when they start getting serious about building wealth in their later years. The fear is that they will make a mistake, lose money, and end up worse off than if they had just played it safe. This is a valid concern because yes, you can lose money in real estate if you buy the wrong property or manage it poorly. You can lose money in stocks if you invest at the wrong time or in the wrong companies. You can lose money in business if you do not understand the market or execute poorly. Risk is real and losses can happen. But here is what you need to understand. The biggest risk you face is not the risk of losing money through a bad investment. It is the risk of getting to the end of your life and realizing you could have changed your situation, but you did not because you were too afraid to try. The risk of regret is far greater than the risk of loss. Furthermore, you can significantly reduce investment risk through education and wise counsel. Most people who lose money in investments do so because they acted on emotion, or followed hot tips from unqualified sources, or jumped into something they did not understand, or took on more risk than they could afford. When you take the time to actually learn about an investment vehicle, to understand how it works, to study both the potential upside and downside, to seek advice from people who have been successful in that area, your risk goes way down. You are not gambling, you are making informed decisions based on sound principles and proven strategy. There is a huge difference between speculation and calculated risk. Speculation is throwing money at something hoping it works out. Calculated risk is analyzing an opportunity, understanding the odds, having a plan for both success and failure scenarios, and moving forward with eyes wide open. Wealthy people take calculated risks all the time. Broke people either take no risks out of fear or take foolish risks out of desperation, and both approaches keep them poor. I want to talk about something that is rarely discussed in financial content, but is absolutely critical to your success, and that is the role of faith in wealth building. Not faith as a magical thinking where you believe hard enough and money appears, but faith as a foundation that sustains you through the difficulty of transformation. Building wealth when you are starting late is hard. You will face setbacks, unexpected expenses, investments that do not perform as expected, months where you feel like you are working incredibly hard, but not making progress, moments when you question whether this is even worth it. If your only motivation is money, you will quit when it gets hard, because the pain of discipline will exceed the pleasure of potential future gain. But if your motivation is deeper, if it is rooted in a conviction that God has called you to faithful stewardship, that you have a responsibility to finish your life well, that you want to be a blessing rather than a burden, that you desire to leave a legacy that points others to truth and generosity, then you have something to sustain you when circumstances are difficult. Faith also provides something that is equally important, which is peace in the process. When you truly believe that God is sovereign, that He works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose, that He is faithful to complete the work He starts in us, then you can pursue wealth building with intensity without anxiety. You can work hard without being desperate. You can take calculated risks without being reckless. You can plan diligently without trying to control outcomes you cannot control. This is the difference between the striving of worldly ambition and the purposeful action of kingdom stewardship. One is rooted in fear, scarcity, and self-reliance. The other is rooted in faith, abundance, and partnership with God. The results might look similar from the outside, but the internal experience is completely different. Let me be very practical about what your daily life needs to look like. If you are serious about this transformation, you need to wake up earlier than you want to because time is precious, and sleeping late is a luxury you cannot afford right now. You use the early morning hours when your mind is fresh and the world is quiet to work on your highest value activities, whether that is studying investment, working on your side business, planning your day, or reviewing your finances. You exercise because your health is foundational to everything else, and you cannot build wealth if your body gives out. You eat well not because you are obsessed with health, but because proper nutrition gives you the energy and mental clarity to perform at your best. You eliminate or severely limit television, social media, and other forms of passive entertainment, because they are time and attention vampires that give nothing back. You spend time in prayer and scripture, because your spiritual foundation is what sustains everything else. You work your job or business with excellence, because mediocrity is not compatible with stewardship. You invest time in learning every single day without exception. You track every dollar that comes in and goes out. You connect with your accountability partner or community regularly. You review your goals and your progress weekly. You make strategic decisions about how to deploy any extra money that comes in. You go to bed at a reasonable hour because rest is not laziness, it is wisdom, and you need to be sharp tomorrow to do it all again. This probably sounds exhausting or extreme to you, and I understand that reaction because it is different from how most people live. Most people drift through their days reacting to whatever comes at them, consuming whatever is in front of them, making decisions based on how they feel in the moment. This is why most people are broke and will stay broke. Transformation requires a different approach. It requires structure, discipline, intentionality, and sacrifice. But here is what nobody tells you. After a few weeks of living this way, it stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like freedom. The discipline that seemed restrictive at first becomes liberating because you are no longer a slave to impulses and emotions and circumstances. You are in control, you are making progress, you are seeing results, and that feeling of forward momentum is more satisfying than any temporary pleasure you gave up. The life of discipline is actually more joyful than the life of indulgence once you experience it, but you have to push through the initial discomfort to discover that truth. Now, I need to address something that might be uncomfortable, but is necessary. Some of you listening to this are in relationships that are actively sabotaging your financial future. Maybe it is a spouse who spends money faster than you can make it. Maybe it is adult children who are constantly needing bailouts for problems they created through their own poor choices. Maybe it is friends who pressure you to spend money on activities you cannot afford because they are not on the same financial journey you are. Maybe it is family members who mock your efforts to change and try to pull you back into comfortable mediocrity. These relationships are a serious obstacle, and you need to address them directly, or you will never succeed. I am not suggesting you abandon people you love, but I am saying you need to set firm boundaries. And you need to be willing to enforce those boundaries even when it creates conflict. If you have a spouse who will not get on board with financial responsibility, you need to have a serious conversation about your future together. And what happens if one of you wants to build wealth and the other wants to keep spending? You might need counseling. You might need separate accounts. You might need to make some very difficult decisions about whether this relationship can continue if you are fundamentally opposed in your financial values and goals. If you have adult children who see you as an ATM machine, you need to stop enabling their dysfunction and start teaching them through your actions that they are responsible for their own choices and consequences. Saying no to adult children who ask for money is not cruel. It is the most loving thing you can do because it forces them to grow up and take responsibility. If you have friends who do not support your financial transformation, you might need to create some distance and find new friends who share your values. This sounds harsh, but your future is more important than anyone's temporary feeling, including your own. The Bible talks about bad company corrupting good character, and this is especially true in finance. You become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. If those 5 people are all broke and complaining about money and making excuses for their situation, you will unconsciously adopt those same patterns. If those 5 people are all wealthy and disciplined and focused on stewardship and growth, you will rise to match that standard. This is not theory. This is observable reality that has been proven over and over. Your environment shapes you more than you realize, and if your environment is toxic to your financial goals, you must change your environment or you will not reach your goals. Period. Let me talk about the psychological component of wealth building that is often ignored. Money is emotional, deeply emotional, and most people's financial problems are actually emotional problems that manifest as money problems. You overspend because you are trying to fill an emotional void with material possessions. You avoid looking at your finances because facing reality creates anxiety and shame. You make impulsive purchases because you are bored or stressed or seeking temporary pleasure. You stay in a dead-end job because you are afraid of the unknown even though you know it is keeping you poor. You do not invest because you are paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice. All of these are emotional issues, not knowledge issues. You know you should not overspend. You know you should face your financial reality. You know impulsive purchases are harmful. You know staying in a dead-end job is limiting your future. You know that not investing is costing you opportunities. The problem is not knowledge. It is emotion. This is why mindset work is so critical to financial transformation. You have to identify the emotional patterns and beliefs that are driving your financial behavior, and you have to change them. This might mean working with a counselor or therapist if you have deep-rooted money issues from childhood. It might mean dealing with trauma or shame or fear that you have been avoiding. It might mean forgiving yourself for past mistakes instead of letting guilt paralyze you. It might mean confronting lies you have believed about yourself or money or what is possible for you. This inner work is not optional if you want lasting change. You can learn all the strategies and principles in the world, but if you have not dealt with the emotional and psychological issues driving your behavior, you will self-sabotage every time you start making progress. I also want to address the spiritual battle that happens when you start pursuing faithful stewardship. The enemy of your soul does not want you financially free. He wants you broke, stressed, anxious, and consumed with survival, because people in that state are not dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. They are not funding missions, starting ministries, helping people in need, or building anything of eternal significance because they are too busy trying to keep their own head above water. When you start making progress financially, when you start breaking generational patterns of poverty, when you start positioning yourself to be a blessing instead of needing blessing, you become a threat, and threats get attacked. You will face unexpected expenses that try to drain your emergency fund. You will face relationship conflict as people resist your changes. You will face internal battles with doubt and discouragement. You will face temptations to give up and go back to the comfortable patterns that kept you stuck. This is not random. This is warfare, and you need to recognize it for what it is and stand firm. The way you stand firm is through anchoring yourself in truth. The truth is that God owns everything and you are the steward. The truth is that faithful stewards are rewarded both in this life and the next. The truth is that financial freedom allows you to be more effective in kingdom work. The truth is that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. The truth is that no weapon formed against you will prosper. The truth is that God has not given you a spirit of fear but of power and love and sound mind. When the enemy whispers lies about how you are too old, too broke, too far behind, too unqualified, you combat those lies with truth. You speak truth out loud. You write truth down. You surround yourself with truth through scripture and community. And you take action based on truth, regardless of how you feel. Let me give you a vision of what is possible if you fully commit to this path and stay consistent for the remainder of your years. Imagine you are 85 years old and sitting in a comfortable home that you own free and clear. You have no debt of any kind. You have multiple income streams flowing in from investments you made years ago that now generate more than enough to cover your expenses with surplus left over. You have a will and estate plan that ensures your wealth gets distributed to causes and people you care about according to your wishes and values. You have been able to fund kingdom work, support missions, help families in crisis, invest in young entrepreneurs, and be a blessing to countless people. Your children and grandchildren see you as an example of faithful stewardship, and they are following the principles you modeled. You have peace about your future because you know you are prepared for whatever comes, whether that is health challenges, economic downturns, or unexpected needs. You have dignity and independence because you are not dependent on anyone else for your survival. You spend your days focused on relationships, on legacy, on pouring into others, on enjoying the fruits of decades of faithful stewardship. This is not fantasy. This is the reality for people who made the decision years ago to reject poverty thinking and embrace stewardship principles with consistency and faith. Compare that to the alternative vision. 85 years old and struggling to pay rent in a small apartment that is not even yours. Stressed every month about whether your Social Security check will cover your expenses. Dependent on government assistance and the charity of others. Unable to afford the health care or medication you need. Isolated because you cannot afford to travel or do activities with people. Anxious about every unexpected expense because you have no margin. Feeling like a burden to your family. Regretting the choices you made or failed to make when you had the opportunity. Leaving debt and problems behind when you die instead of blessing and legacy. Knowing you could have changed your situation, but you chose comfort over growth, excuses over action, fear over faith. This too is reality for millions of people who had the same opportunities you have right now, but did not take them. The time is now. The person is you. The outcome depends on what you do next. Choose wisely. Choose boldly. Choose today, because your future is watching, and your legacy is waiting, and both are determined by the decision you make in this moment. You were not forgotten. You were separated for such a time as this. Now make it count.